Hi, this is Sharon McNall, and I'm an independent demonstrator with Stampin' Up! And today I'm going to show you a technique called block stamping. And what I mean by that is we'll take a Stampin' Up! Block, clear block, and we will color on it with our markers to create this background water effect. So let's get started creating this card. The supplies we'll be needing to use, the stamp sets we'll be using High Tide, and within that stamp set we will be using the little grass here. There's two little stamps here, and then we'll be also using the water and these birds. The next stamp set we'll be using is from the Colorful Seasons, and we'll be using Just Breathe. And for Thinlet dies, we'll be using the Seasonal Layers Thinlets, and we'll be cutting out the Adirondack chair from that Thinlet set. So let's get started creating this card. The trickiest part with the card is creating this background. So we will go ahead and do that first. And what I use is a piece of Whisper White, and this is cut 3 3/4 by 5. And what we will need is we're going to need a paper towel, and we'll get our clear block here, and we'll also need some Stampin' Right markers. So these are the colors that I chose, and when I mark up my block, I like to keep them in order. So I'll work from the top bottom. So I've got, these are the colors I chose. We've got Crushed Curry, and then we'll go with a lighter orange, and that would be Calypso Coral. And then I would move in some Flirty Flamingo, and I also have Tangerine Tango. And then we'll bring in our blues. So I go with a lighter blue, which is Marina Mist. And then I've got Dapper Denim. And then on this, the original card, I didn't put the brown in it, so I want to try it with the brown. And the only brown I have is Tip Top Taupe, which is a retired in color. But I thought I'd want to add that in just to see. It's the only brown I have. So you've got to use what you got to use. So let's get started creating the card. So like I said, we start from the top. I'm using the brush tip on the markers. So I'm just going, what I'm going to do, you want to make sure your block is clear first, which I've already done ahead of time. So you're just creating that sun portion up here and just running your marker right across. And then we'll move in with the next color, which again is, this one is Calypso Coral. And you want to start within that yellow and just move it down. And then Flirty Flamingo would be our next color. And you can just move in those colors, go up into the yellow, wherever you want to go. And then we've got, this was what, Calypso Coral, no, Tangerine Tango. And there's not a lot of ink on there, so just hard to see there. And then I've got the blues now, so Marina Mist, oops, I want the brush tip. And just going right across, covering your entire block. Dapper Denim. And again, moving that blue into that other area. It's going to create that deep water effect. And then for the sand, I'm bringing in Tip Top Taupe. So now what I want to do is I'm going to go back over some of the colors that I really want shown in here and mixed in. And it's more or less creating that sky effect. So the oranges, yellows, pinks, I'm just going to just make sure it's pretty saturated. And when you do block stamping, your card is not going to be the same every single time, because it depends on the water, the amount of water you put in, and how much markers and the coloring that you do. All right, so we've got our block set. Actually, I'm going to add a little bit more blue in here. All right, so now we're going to need our Stampin trimmer. Excuse me, Stampin trimmer. We don't need our Stampin trimmer. We need our spritzer. So we're going to spritz this block. And we got to be, when you do it, you want to be really careful. You want to make sure you don't get oversaturate your block. And hopefully I can get this on the first time. I'll show you a failed attempt that I did yesterday. But, oops. Make sure it's going the right way. Okay, so now if you can see the water transferring on there. There, that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to bring in my Whisper White. And I'm going to place this down. I'm going to flip it. Look carefully. Make sure it's centered. Press down. And hopefully you can see this transferring onto the paper. And it's just, you just want to press this firmly. Do not rock your block, don't move it, let it go. And when you see that all the ink is saturated into the Whisper White, you can remove your block. So that's the effect we got. It's so much different than my original one. So it just, again, all depends on where you place your markers, your ink colors. Here it looks like I used more orange in the middle. But again, you never know what you're going to get. All right, so our next step, just make sure your desk is clean. We're going to heat set this with our heat tool. Because right now the water is still not dry, and we want to get that dry for our next step. So what I do is I just heat from the front side. Your Whisper White's going to get a little warped, but that's okay. And you can see on the back side it is wet. All right, so that's good enough. And now we're going to be stamping with photopolymer stamps. So we want to make sure we have a piercing mat. And we'll bring that into the picture with a piece of scrap paper on top of it. So now we're going to create our water effect here with a high tide stamp. And I'm using Marina Mist as my ink. And I'm just going to ink this up. And I'm going to put this right over the blue and just press for a second and lift it up. So that looks pretty nice. Now if you want, you could add a little bit more over top. You just don't want to go, too far over the edge. All right, that looks pretty good. And our next step would be to bring in the birds. And for the birds, I used chocolate chip. Bring in our chocolate chip and the birds. And you got to be careful with the birds. Make sure they're going the right way. You don't want upside down birds. So I'm going to just stamp them up here in the sunset, off to the left and across. Okay, and then I see I got a little mistake right there, but that's okay. Must have some ink on my fingers. All right, so and then our next step is to add in the grass. So I use soft suede for that. And there's two different grass stamps, and I'll bring those in. One that looks like this, and one that looks a lot smaller. Here, whoops, a lot smaller. So we're going to start with the bigger grass first, and then we'll fill in with the smaller. So I'm just going to start over here and just go all the way across. It doesn't have to be straight across. Grass grows in all different heights. And if you want, you can overstamp just to fill it in even more. All right, so now I'm going to bring in the smaller grass, and I'm just going to fill in those areas that just need it, that you can't get with that other stamp. All right, so then our final step would be to, you know what I'm going to do? I don't like how these waves are not filling in this area here. So I'm just going to bring that Marina Mist in one more time with the waves and just add some more blue down here. And I'm going to flip it this way. There, I think that looks a lot better. Okay, now we're going to add our sentiment Just Breathe, and for that I use chocolate chip ink. And we'll just ink that up. And that's just going to go right down here on the bottom. Okay, so that's all done. Our front panel's done, except for the adding the chair. And also for my envelope, I'll bring my Whisper White envelope in, and all I'm going to do is stamp that up with the birds and the chocolate chip. And I'm just going to have them coming across there. And then our Flirty Flamingo card base. This is cut 8.5 by 5.5, scored at 4 1/4. And I'm just going to add the birds on the inside. I don't think you need a white panel here. You can write on that Flirty Flamingo. And I'm just going to do 2 random sets of birds and maybe just add another one over here. So they're flying across the top. All right. So now let's assemble this card. And we'll bring in a piece of Cajun Craze cardstock, and this is cut 4 by 5 1/4. And our adhesive, hopefully I won't run out. I just remembered I didn't check it, so hopefully we'll get through the video. And make sure you add a little bit of adhesive in the middle there. And just a quarter of an inch on all 4 sides here. I'm going to flip this over because I think I've got some ink on my fingers and I don't want to ruin this card. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And the next step is just to add adhesive again. Oops. And it's going to go on top of that Flirty Flamingo. And again, I'm just going to flip this over. It looks like I kind of transferred some ink onto that Whisper White. Okay, so that's our card. Now what we need to do is, you know, I die cutted this with a Big Shot using the magnetic platform and 2 acrylic plates, and I used a die brush and took out all those parts. So I'll bring in my fine tip glue, and we're just going to add the glue to the back side of the chair. All the way up. Make sure you get it on the bigger parts. Okay, and now we're just going to flip this over and add it to our card. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to cover up that mistake I've got right there. So I'm just going to put part of the chair there. And then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take a block and I'm just going to press this down and hold it in place for a good 5 seconds. And again, down at the bottom. That way your hands aren't getting all glue and it's getting a firm press and it'll stick so much quicker. All right, so there's our card for today. Hopefully you learned a new technique. Let me bring in my first card. I really like both of them now that I added more water to this one. But I like how you can bring in the Flirty Flamingo as a card base, because I would not typically put Cajun Craze and Flirty Flamingo in this color scheme, but since the sky has those colors in it, even though I didn't use the Cajun Craze marker, they mixed together to create that Craze. So hopefully you liked the Just Breathe card and you learned a new technique today. If you have any questions, please write those in the comment section. And if you need any Stampin' Up! Supplies, please visit my website at inspiredbygram.com. Thanks for watching and have a great day.